to gavel us into session. On my clock, it's starting time. Welcome to our first regular council meeting for the month of November. And maybe it's appropriate for me to welcome you back to Eastern Standard Time. If you're like me, you're still sort of adapting to that with the darkness that's coming an hour earlier, I guess. So thank you for being here this evening. We'll start tonight with our roll call. Ms. Clerk, if you will. I'm present.
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
And in the case of Councilmember Singleton, he sent us a text indicating that he'll probably be approximately 15 minutes late, so he will be arriving, I'm sure. Okay, the next item is our Pledge of Allegiance. So for those of you who can and will, please stand and join me in giving honor to our country by saying our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. For our invocation this evening, I'd like to recognize Reverend Kevin Seymour. It's been my privilege to come to know him over the last year, I guess, Kevin. I'm not sure when, but at any rate, one of the privileges of being mayor is to have a chance to meet a variety of people in the faith community, and Kevin is one of those. Kevin is the pastor of the Ebenezer United Methodist Church, and so he has agreed to come this evening and offer up our invocation. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the council. We're technically on the edge of Raleigh, our church, but it's a Garner church. The people there are Garner people, and a church, if it's anything, is its people. So let's pray. Thank you, gracious God, for our many blessings in this month of Thanksgiving. We have countless things for which to be thankful for, and for the people's business this evening, which has been entrusted to these council members. Let them take this task seriously tonight. Let them use their eyes and ears to watch and listen before they speak. And gracious God, let them be caretakers of this community, its resources that are natural resources, its people, and especially the least of these, attending to the needs of those who have fallen on hard times. We pray, gracious God, that these counselors will be ambassadors of this town and develop opportunities for the common good. We pray, God, that they will always be mindful of the human need for artistic expression and athletic competition. Thanking you now once again, God, for those who keep us safe from fire and from harm, from violence. Let these counselors be blessed this evening as they lead your people in the town of Garner, that it may forever be a place of honorable industry, sound learning, and pure manners. We now pray this in the holy name of Jesus, who reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. It's great to see you again, and I wish you well. Stay well. I was just thinking when you said you're right there in Raleigh, maybe we could arrange to annex you guys just on into Garner.
Yeah. I'm sure it would pass a vote by the church. So,
thank you. Keep up.
I'll line up the votes for you. How about
I hear you. Yeah. Keep up the good work out there, Kevin. It's great to see you, sir. Thank you. Okay, council, we will follow the agenda, and the first item is the adoption of the agenda that you have before you. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is there a second? Then there is one. Discussion, changes of any kind? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
If there's any opposition, no, and there is none, so the agenda is adopted. Okay, item F on the agenda is we have one presentation this evening, and I see our Fire chief is here, Mr. Poole, so I'm going to recognize him, who will be sharing some information with us this evening regarding demographic and socioeconomic profiles. So good to see you as well, Mr. Fire Chief.
Thank you,
He's
sir.
a fellow Rotarian. I see him at least once a week usually, and it's good to see you here and have you at our meeting. Floor is yours, sir.
Give me just 1 second. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to share one piece of analytics that we've recently completed in our department. So I won't take up too much of your time tonight. I wanted to go over 2 areas of focus that we had honed in on several months ago. As you know, we have an assistant chief now that is a data analyst and accreditation manager, and he has been able to analyze a lot of information out of our record management system now, and so we're starting to put that to use. And he created this report, and when I read it, I really felt like it was something that the council might want to see. I think a lot of us, and especially right now, we get focused on the future, we get focused on growth, and we get focused on what's coming to our community. But a lot of times, at least for our business, we have to remember what we currently have and what is in our district now. And so they are just or as important as what is coming in the future. And so this report and these analytics look at what we actually respond to on a daily basis. And so I found it very interesting, and again, thought it was some information that you might find beneficial. Sure. So this report goes over 2 different risk profiles for us. The first risk profile I'm going to mention is our building risks, and then the other is some demographic risk of our service area. So when Chief Hathcock provided this assessment, we developed a building risk profile on an acronym we call GOVAP, which is Garner Occupancy Vulnerability Assessment Profile. Which, just to get past the acronym, what it is we took all of the buildings in our service district outside of residential, so any other buildings, and we classified them. Are they low risk to us, are they moderate risk, or are they higher risks? And so just by the numbers you can see in our report, based on this risk assessment, there were 382 buildings we identified as low risks. There were 802 we identified as moderate risk, and then 60 buildings that were identified as high risk. So then you would certainly ask yourself what determines where a building falls in our risk management. And so this is a chart in how we constructed that profile. So you can see at the very top, it's based on points. So the first thing that we analyze on a building, and we use a commercial building for an example, is we want to know how many people occupies that building. And so if it was less than 25, it would get a point of 1. If it was more than 100, it would get a 3. So then we looked at the building construction. So is it like a school that's fire resistant or non-combustible? It will not burn. Or is it an older commercial building or older building that is unprotected? And so each building got a point value based on building construction. And then the number of stories. So height is a risk for us for access and a lot of other reasons. So number of stories was a point value. Does it have an automated extinguishing system? Does it have a sprinkler system so that if there is a fire, an automatic system will suppress it or at least contain it until we arrive? So that's a point. How big is the building? So what is the square footage of the building? What is the building used for? And then how many gallons of water it would take for us to mitigate the scene. And so we took all of these buildings and we scored them in each one of these categories, and then it gets a point value. So total points, if it was less than 11, it would go into a low risk category. If it was 12 to 14, it would go into a moderate, and anything above 15 gets classified as high risk buildings. And what we're trying to do is we've created planning zones for our fire district, and we're trying to determine in each planning zone what type of buildings and risks are in each one of these zones. And so that's just a snapshot of the buildings And then what I have for you tonight, and it should be in your packet, is, so we created, or Chief Hathcock created, some maps that depict this. So just for this one alone, this is our Station 1 district. So the dark blue that you see, that is inside the city limits of Garner that our Station 1 responds to. The lighter blue shaded area is the unincorporated area that station responds to, so the county area. And then you see the legend, you can see their fire stations are depicted in red houses. We've noted schools and libraries. But then what you can see, so if you'll look at, this is our Station 1 planning zone, looking at the building profile, so your low, moderate, and high risk are in green, yellow, and red. And you can see just how many of those buildings are in our Station 1 city planning zone. So that's pretty extensive, and as we go through them, you'll see that the amount of buildings vary in each fire district. The data was collected for 16, 17, and 18 because we are using 3-year increments, and we're 19, 20, and 21, so we're not there yet. But then, and I'll talk about in just a little bit, we also captured in that area some other things. Just for a point of reference, how much does an average home cost in that planning zone, right? So the average home of a Station 1 planning zone for that is around $96,000. And this will make sense when we go to the next page. So this is just an idea of Station 1's district and the amount of building and what type of risks building-wise are in that district in the city versus the unincorporated area. And you can see this large cluster here. So then look at our Station 2 area. So our Station 2, as you know, is our most rural district. It's located off Sauls Road, just off 1010 Highway. And so this light green is our unincorporated area. The majority of this district is in the county. But it does have some city districts. So there's a pocket here, and then right here. And this is that 401 1010 corridor. And you can start to see some clusters of risk pop up. I think the next slide probably is a little more clear based on size. But if you'll look as a point of reference, in this area, the average home value is around $330,000, significantly higher than our Station 1 area. But our building risk is much lower because it is mainly residential in property. Looking at our Station 3, and this is our second to largest building risk profile area. So this is Station 3 here, which is located at Vandora and Timber Drive. The dark blue depicts the city limit area, and then the lighter blue is the unincorporated area. And so you can see the majority of Station 3's district looks residential by nature as well, but it has a large cluster of commercial building risks in this area here and along this area. If you look at that, just using as another, like I said, the point of reference, the average home value in this area is around $235,000. And then our Station 4, which is located off Rayner Road, it's on a cul-de-sac called Spaceway Court, and a lot of people do not know where that station is. So if you've ever been to rush hour go-karting, I use that as a point of reference. It's just before that. So the majority of this area is unincorporated. This is the light shade. But then you have these dark areas are inside the city limits. And so as a reference, this would be Greenfield Parkway, White Oak, all this area here. And you can see the clusters of low to moderate risk facilities here. Home value, again, this area is a little bit higher, $326,000. And so we created, each department or each station created a city and a county planning zone, and we identified the building risks of each one. And so that talks about the building risk. And what I want to touch on briefly next is demographic risk. So when we did this analysis, we also looked at what's in the district, what goes along with each district, what type of target hazards outside of buildings does these districts create. Now I was born and raised in Garner my entire life. I have spent my career with the Garner Fire Department. So I think I can tell you something, but as you know, we need data to back up and support those things. And what I'm finding is sometimes I am not right. As an example, I would have bet, when I asked what the busiest time of our day is, I would have bet the family farm that it was from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at night. I've lived here my whole life. I know when the bell goes off at the fire station. Reality is our busiest time of the day is somewhere between 11 and 1 in the afternoon. And data showed me that. So we're trying to use data more and more to help tell our story and make sure our assessments are right. So the demographics is the point I'm referencing with my opinion. So I pulled out, and in your report, you've got a detailed analysis at the end. I'm not going to go through it all, but I did want to pull out some specific bullet points that I found interesting about each district. So going back to Station 1, that's what we looked at first. So when we rated all 4 of our departmental districts, our Station 1 city limit area, so any area that's inside the city limits of Station 1, has the highest overall number of moderate and high-risk buildings. So that is essentially a target hazard for us. Next, it also has the highest overall number of households below poverty level. So when we're looking at our demographics and what's in our community, this area is our highest below poverty level. It is our highest overall with minority population. So when we're trying to identify that type of information, that area is highest overall in minority. It has the lowest overall median household income value. And you start to ask yourself, well, why does this matter for a fire department? Why does this matter for the fire chief? Well, when you look at how fires occur and where fires occur, they occur with inappropriate heating. So if you're a lower income family and you don't have the money or the ability to heat appropriately, you may heat using a kerosene heater. I have been to calls where people have the stove on high and have the door open, and that's how they're heating portions of their house is by their oven. So this information is important to us based on the type of calls we go to. So this district to us equates the highest demo socio risk factor score in our entire fire district. So that's really something that we're focusing not what the growth is, but what we actually have here today. Next is our second, probably, I wouldn't say concerning, but our second largest planning zone of evaluation is our Station 3 city limit planning zone. So based on the scores, it had the second highest demo socio risk factor score. It has the highest number of false alarms per 1,000 population. So you have to look at what type of buildings create false alarms. A lot of residentials that have security systems creates a false alarm. If you're referring back to that map, a large part of their district is residential in nature. There are some schools in their district that create false alarms. So it is the highest number of false alarms per 1,000 number of population. It's also the highest number of other calls, so anything not fire related. As you know, we run a plethora of other calls, medical calls, investigation, CO monitor, all these other service calls. That district is the highest number of calls per 1,000 outside of fire. And the next one probably tells you a story of why. This district has the oldest overall median age population. So this area of our department is an older age area, which as you get older, you require more medical assistance. So outside of fire calls, this area generates a large number of our medical calls in our district. We provide first responder medical coverage, so any life-threatening emergency, an engine or a fire truck goes along with the ambulance to render aid. And so this is important to us to understand that our Station 1 area has more fires, more targets. This area has a larger number of older population and requires different types of calls. And by size alone, this is the largest urban planning zone based on square miles. So I found that interesting. I wouldn't have thought that until we started looking at the report. So what I came here tonight is to show you some information that we've been able to find, to talk about. We have rated all of the buildings in our area, so we know what is a low, medium, and high risk. And then we looked at our demographics to fill out what is in each district and why are we having fires in this area and these calls in this area, and trying to correlate that to our day-to-day operations. So in your report, and I won't go into it unless you have any questions, but behind your map legends, I submitted all of our supporting documentation about these and there are numerous other methodologies in the report, and it's here. So I won't go over this, but you can, if you want to spend some time another time or have any questions, I'll be glad to follow up. But it basically gives you the point value of each zone, what they were highest, lowest in, and then some data comparisons as we go through. If you're interested in things like crime, marital status, all these demographic information, I'll be glad to talk about another time. But I just wanted to come here tonight, and I found this interesting, and I haven't talked to you in a while, so I thought we would bring it and see if you had any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Fire departments, like other elements of our society, are changing somewhat rapidly, and so information like this, as long as it can help your department do a better job, certainly it's worthwhile, and it is interesting information to see different areas of our town and the different demographics that are there, sure enough. So I'll let council have a chance to ask questions or comment if they please to. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Poole, that was great. As we're growing, I'm thinking won't be very far off. We're going to be looking at Station 5 down in the McCullers Crossroads area with all that growth and all going on down there. We'll probably see that figure probably sometime next year. Is that a safe assumption of sorts? Or
Yes,
have you got
sir.
any data at this point on that? Is it too early?
No, and I meant to bring this out. So on number 3, so we saw number 1, but if you'll look, see these clusters here. So this area of target hazards that are developing would be caught by Station 5's district. So we're starting to see some of that growth. At least, so here's that cluster I talked about with 2's area, and then this area, all this right here would fall under that district response. So yes, sir, we're in the near future.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, others? I'll go to Ms. Behringer.
Just like to thank you, Chief Poole. Appreciate this. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Many years ago, I got some very good advice from someone, and that was to make no assumptions. And when we make assumptions, we generally make the wrong assumptions. And so this information helps us steer us in the right direction when we're looking at the future. We're looking at what we're dealing with now and where that might go. So appreciate this work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Singleton, I know you weren't here for some of the presentation. Do you have any questions, sir?
No, but I did see it in our package. Thank you for the information, Matt.
Yes, sir.
A lot of good
Okay.
detailed information.
Okay, Mr. Dellinger.
Just thank you for the information. And I know this is all relatively new data. Do you have plans or notions in the future, COVID notwithstanding, of using some of this information to target community outreach and education?
Yeah, so our fire prevention and education program is really reactive in nature. We have not done a good job in being proactive. So if you need fire prevention scheduled, you call and we come. We have not done a good job of getting out in the community and educating some of these things. And so what we're trying to do is gather what information we need to do and then develop a plan on how to educate the public. Briefly, Mr. Dillinger, I had a conversation with an elementary school teacher several months ago. There's a large number of their students that are Hispanic, and their parents are immigrants that can barely speak English. And so the child, what she was saying was the child is the communicator between the school and the parent. And we deal with sometimes Hispanics not calling if there's a fire in fear of retribution. And so what she and I talked about was if you can educate the child that we're not there to look into if you should be here or not. We're here to make sure there's no hazard. We're make sure you're here that's safe, and we're free. We don't charge you. And so she and I talked about if you can educate that child, they can educate the parents. We've got to develop a plan on how to combat certain things like that, because that affects future fires.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Vance?
Chief Poole, thank you very much for the information. Good report. Thank you very
Yes, sir.
much.
Thank you, Mr. Vance.
Let me ask you, I guess, sort of a general question, Chief. Obviously, COVID-19 is so much a part of our lexicon and our language and what we think about and do on a day-to-day basis. Just in sort of a high overview, can you tell us, from your perspective, how COVID-19 has impacted your department?
Yes, sir. What I would tell you is COVID is real. There are a lot of theories out there, but we run COVID calls every single day. When it started, I think our employees were very fearful and had a misunderstanding of it, I think like much of the country. And then over time, we have accepted it. They respond to it every day. We have had to change a lot of our policies, a lot of our procedures. We have had employees that have, them or significant others have had COVID, so we've had to deal with that internally. And then I'm sure that you're aware of the line of duty death of the Clayton Deputy Fire Chief, Jason Dean. So Jason Dean and I were colleagues, and if you don't think it's real, go to a funeral and watch two very young daughters get a fire helmet of their dad. And so it has impacted us and our neighbors dramatically. So I would attest to that. But as far as our day-to-day operations, we run COVID calls every day, and a lot of our policies have had to change because of it.
Do I understand correctly that through the county and the town, of course, you've been able to acquire equipment, safety equipment, PPE, or whatever you need that helps protect our firefighters?
Yes, sir. And thank you for that opportunity. So publicly, the Wake County Emergency Operations Center has been second to none. They are the ones that issue us our PPE, like our N95 masks. So when whatever supplies that we need generally is covered by the CARES Act, and so we put in an order and we receive those within the same day. So supplies were difficult to obtain early on, but now supply chains have increased, and they have been more than helpful to get us the things we need. Absolutely. I can't thank them enough.
Good. Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. Anything else from council? Again, we thank you for the work your department does. They're out there every day, and we appreciate what you do. And thanks. Come back again and
Yes, sir.
share with us as you have opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, council, the next item is the consent agenda, and there are several items on there, as you are aware. But unless anybody sees something there that they feel like needs to go onto the regular agenda, and I'm sure there's probably not. But anyway, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, properly motioned and seconded. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
And if there's any opposition, no, and there is none. Okay, moving to our public hearings and item H on the agenda. Let me find my note here. Our first hearing this evening actually is a continuation of a public hearing that was initiated on October 5, 2020. And this council did not take formal action other than to continue that hearing and resume that after a request was made to, at least for the applicant, to have further meeting, I believe, with some neighborhood folks. That meeting has taken place, as I understand it. So I'm going to move us back into that public hearing, and I would say to any of you who plan to offer testimony, we won't go back over testimony that's already been given, but if you plan to testify this evening, if you will, go and be sworn by our clerk just before we begin the meeting. Who are those persons? I know there are several.
Everybody good here? Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly, sincerely, truly declare and affirm that the evidence you provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. You've all been sworn.
Okay, thank you all. And
Yeah, because they're opening the
I'm going to open the public meeting, and in so doing, remind us all that this is a quasi-judicial hearing. We talked about the stipulations regarding that when we opened the meeting back on October 5, so I won't repeat those. But in the meantime, council members, if there's been any ex parte communication, that's one of the elements of that. You should reveal it at this time. Hearing none, okay. So I believe we'll begin this evening. Let's see, Ms. Jones, are you back up at this time? So thank you and welcome.
Thank you all. As Mr. Mayor already explained, that this is a continuation from October 5th meeting. Yes. And the project was for JS Common Center Park, and it's a subdivision plan taking 3 lots to turn them into 6 lots. And as he also mentioned, the project was tabled so that Hunter's Mark subdivision could get more information from the applicant, and that has happened. And do you all need a refresher from me? Any information to remind you of the project, or y'all okay with that?
Can we go with a sort of a broad stroke overview? Certainly not with the level of detail that you presented initially.
The tract size is 53.22 acres. And like I said, it's a subdivision plan, taking 3 lots, turn them into 6. And the site plan will come back to you all for the building review and all that good stuff. But right now, it's just for the subdivision of the property.
Okay. And I'll see if council has any questions for you, Ms. Jones. Any on this side? Any over here? Okay, hearing none. Can you advise who will be following you?
Ms. Isabel Maddox, Mr. Greg, and...
Yes, okay. All right.
Do you want me to pull up anything for you, Greg?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, members of council.
Good evening,
It's a
sir.
pleasure being here. I'm Greg Sandroder at 104 Lake Cliff Court in Cary. I want to thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to appear again before you tonight. We were charged with 2 items. To number 1, assemble a larger team so we better be better positioned to explain our project and answer any questions you may have. And number 2, to get to know the good folks in the Hunter's Mark neighborhood. And so we believe we made good progress on both fronts. On the first front, Wednesday, the 21st of October, we had a virtual neighborhood meeting with the Hunter's Mark neighborhood. We had approximately 15 to 18 participants from what I remember. The meeting ran about an hour and a half. It was candid, it was forthright, and we met some terrific folks there. We learned about a lot of different things. We learned about the stone entries and how important those are, about the irrigation system that they put in and maintain over the years that they'd like to keep. We talked about our construction schedule for the project and the realignment of Wilmington Road. We talked about and learned more about some of the hardships and irritants that occurred during the Amazon project. We established a communication protocol. We set up a special email where any resident can at any time email us, and we'll compile those emails and respond back to all neighbors. So all neighbors, it's sort of like a listserv, and we'll be doing that throughout the entirety of the project. We've already sent out our first one. And we feel the neighborhood meeting went well, and we're hoping that we get an opportunity to meet these good people one day in person. Because of masking, I'm not quite sure if anyone is here tonight from the neighborhood, but I'd welcome to hear any comments they may have. And I think we're off to a good start there. So thank you for the opportunity to give us time to get to know those people. Number two, we have expanded our team. So again, we can provide some more detailed information on the project should you have any questions. And with that, I'd like to introduce you our land use attorney, Isabel Worthy-Maddox.
Okay. Thank you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As Mr. Sandroder said, I'm here tonight on behalf of Hamilton Merritt, the prospective developer. Here with Mr. Sandroder, obviously, Mr. James Whitaker, our civil engineer, Tom Hester, MAI appraiser, Richard Adams, our traffic engineer. As Allison indicated, we're proposing a 6-lot subdivision, 53 acres on Jones Sausage and Wilmington roads. And while the industrial zoning permits the future industrial uses, the potential size and intensity of this subdivision and also its location within the I-40 overlay require that this be a special use subdivision. Also, under the UDO, if a subdivision is deemed to have extraordinary impacts, the planning director can also send it for approval to the planning commission and council, which he has done. So, and then therefore that pushes you into a quasi-judicial process. There are 10 findings that you need to make in order to support an approval. And Mr. Dellinger last meeting, I think, had some questions and concerns, and we've tried to build a better case to present you the evidence that will allow you to make the required findings. Just to go over those very briefly, number one, the proposed use will not endanger public health and safety. 2, proposed use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting properties.
Ma'am.
The proposed use will comply with all applicable provisions of the UDO.
Ma'am, there's been a request, if you don't mind, if you could maybe lower your mask a little,
Okay.
I think
I'm sorry.
it'll make your articulate.
Trying to be safe.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Number 4, if completed as proposed, the development will comply with all requirements of the section. 5, the proposed use will be compatible with the approximate area in which it will be located. Number 6, the proposed use is consistent with the transportation plan, other relevant adopted plans and policies, and the stated purpose and intent of the UDO. Number 7, proposed use is compatible with adjacent uses in terms of building scale, site design, buffering, screening, operating characteristics, hours, traffic, lighting, noise, odor, dust, and other external impacts. Number 8, any significant impacts will be mitigated or offset, including impacts to the natural environment. 9, public safety, transportation, utility facilities, and services will be available to serve the subject property while maintaining sufficient levels of service for existing development. And 10, adequate assurances of continuing maintenance have been provided. So although you'll hear about the prospective industrial use tonight, keep in mind that this is really just about the subdivision. We're not at the site plan stage. So you're really just looking at the specific requirements as they apply to the subdivision. And you will have another bite of the apple, as this will have to come back to council for approval of the special use site plan as well. Your staff report confirms compliance with the UDO and consistency with the comprehensive plan. And Allison did a good job last meeting of going through that. But we will provide expert testimony to go through the various details that will allow you to make the 10 findings. So I'll ask each witness to come up separately and just testify, as opposed to me asking them questions, which is sort of choppy. And they'll give their testimony to various of the findings, and then you'll have an opportunity afterwards to ask them questions. And so I'll first call Mr. James Whitaker, PE, to address findings 1, 3, 4, part of 5, part of 7, 8, and 9. Mr. Whitaker.
Good evening, council members. I'm James Whitaker.
Good evening.
I'm a professional engineer licensed here in the state of North Carolina. I've got over 20 years' experience as a project designer, project manager, and surveyor in North Carolina and other states. And I've been a project manager and civil engineer on well over 200 projects in North Carolina and throughout the country. I've got significant experience in preparing and modifying subdivision plans similar to this one, and also familiar with the ordinances of North Carolina, including the town of Garner. I worked on this subdivision plan. My company prepared these plans, and it's in my professional opinion the project meets all the requirements of special use subdivision plan under Article 3.14 of the UDO. In my professional opinion, the subdivision plan complies with all the applicable provisions of the UDO. Including in those is the buffers, setbacks, utilities, road improvements, and stormwater regulations. Regarding the buffer, we have a perimeter buffer around the entire site of at least 45 feet, which meets the UDO requirements. We've got 7.4 acres of dedicated open space and a tree coverage area of 10.68%. There's a 15 and 25-foot street yard along Jones Sausage Road and Calabar Street frontage that meets the UDO requirements. There's also existing 25-foot type A buffer along the community commercial lots that are up against the Hunter's Mark subdivision. Regarding utilities, the project will connect the City of Raleigh public sanitary, sewer, and water through existing infrastructure, and it will not place any undue burden on the existing systems. The road improvements, the project will include the realignment of Wilmington Road and Calabar Street. The new portion of Wilmington Road and Calabar will be built to Town of Garner major collector street standards, which will be three lanes and a 74-foot wide right-of-way with new sidewalks, street lights, and curb and gutter. We feel these improvements will enhance the overall traffic circulation and the pedestrian connectivity throughout this area. The proposed lighting meets the requirements of the Town and Garner lighting ordinance, and they will all be LED fixtures. The fixtures will have zero uplight, low glare, and a warm white light, exhibiting a color temperature of no more than 4,000 Kelvin. That all meets Garner UDO requirements. Regarding stormwater, we're not within a watershed protection area, and the subdivision will meet all the stormwater requirements of the Town of Garner. We propose 3 stormwater wet retention basins that are shown on our site plan. Those will treat all the impervious surfaces for nitrogen and water quality. In my professional opinion, the subdivision plan is compatible with adjacent uses in terms of site design, buffering, and screening and operating characteristics. The proposed use is compatible with the Amazon distribution center across the street, and any adverse impacts on adjacent residential uses or the natural environment will be mitigated through our buffers, setbacks, and stormwater control measures that we've implemented on the site. We don't feel that this project will endanger public health or safety and will not be overly burdensome on existing public safety and utility services in the area. And the project is consistent with the spirit and purpose of the UDO. The property is currently zoned heavy industrial, which is I-2, and a small portion of it is zoned service business. Both of these uses are within the I-40 overlay, or both zoning districts with the I-40 overlay allow for a variety of industrial uses, including flex space, industrial use, indoor and outdoor manufacturing, and production. Accordingly, the project is permitted by the existing zoning. The project is consistent with the goals of the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan. The comprehensive plan designates the first parcel, which is the northernmost parcel, as the neighborhood commerce center, which includes a mix of commercial uses in close proximity to residential neighborhoods. And it designates the second parcel, which is the larger southern parcel, as an employment campus, which contemplates an employment center supporting commercial uses, including light manufacturing, assembly, distribution, warehouses, and offices. Additionally, Section 2.8 of the comprehensive plan specifically addresses the northeast gateway of the town and states that the entranceway to Jones Sausage Road is an untapped resource due to its access to the interstate and proximity to major employers and distribution centers. and that the development in the area should encourage the core industrial purpose. This project proposes a light industrial center with a variety of light manufacturing uses, which will utilize Jones Sausage Road as a resource and enhance the Northeast Gateway. Accordingly, that makes the project consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan. The northernmost portion of the project is within the I-40 overlay district. That section of the UDO states that the required setbacks for yards not adjacent to the right-of-way of I-40 shall be as set forth with the underlying zoning. This property isn't directly adjacent to I-40, so therefore our setbacks are based on the underlying zoning codes. The subdivision complies with the applicable provisions of the I-40 overlay, and additionally, the subdivision complies with the setback requirements of the underlying zoning. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have a question for Mr. Whitaker? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have a copy of Mr. Whitaker's affidavit, original signed notarized affidavit. Shall I hand that to the clerk? Okay.
Yes, if you will.
I'll do that, and I'll next call Tom Hester to give us testimony on, as addressing findings 2 and 5.
Thank you.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Tom Hester. I'm a real estate appraiser in Raleigh, 2424 Glenwood Avenue. I'm a state certified general appraiser in North Carolina. I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute, which is a national professional organization. I hold the MAI designation. Also have a North Carolina broker's license, regulated by and watched over by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission as well. And I've been appraising properties in Wake County for over 35 years. I'm here tonight to address the items 2 and 5, specifically whether this proposed subdivision will injure the adjacent and the abutting properties. The northern end of the site is maybe the most sensitive with regard to those questions. I believe those are the small lots 5 and 6. They are currently zoned service business, and in fact the existing configuration of the streets already creates one of those lots. So the subdivision itself, the proposed subdivision won't actually do anything to change that lot. We'll change the configuration of the roads, and realigning Wilmington Road will in fact create the second of those lots. So 5 and 6 will just by the road realignment will be created. They're already zoned service business. They were contemplated on the recorded map in 1999 that laid out the sort of the parent parcels of the Hunter's Mark subdivision. So they've been basically recorded since that time. So they, in effect, they are existing service business lots, and of course, service business, excuse me, permits a variety of neighborhood business type uses, restaurants, some office uses, things like that, that you would typically see at that kind of intersection and adjacent to a subdivision. The other adjacent properties to the west, as you go south of the property, it's sort of the bulk of the new lines that create the new subdivision. The property to the west is a large parcel with one single family home on it. To the south, there are 2 small, older single family homes on 1 acre and a 1.5 acre lot. All of that land is zoned R40. And then, of course, across Jones Sausage is the Amazon property. But looking at those, at the configuration of the layout, looking at the service business and the existing I-2 zoning, it is my conclusion that the proposed subdivision will not have any negative effect on the adjacent and the abutting property. I have a report here that talks a little bit about what the adjacent properties are. I did take a look at some service business zone property adjacent to the Van Story Hills subdivision, the Timber Crossing Shopping Center, just to see the properties in that subdivision that are adjacent to the shopping center, to the rear of the shopping center, compared to other properties in that subdivision, found no difference in the sales price. I also, just because Amazon is already there and is obviously a big presence in that immediate area, I looked at the Hunter's Mark subdivision at the sales of houses in that subdivision during 2016 and 2017, before the Amazon project was announced. It was announced in, as far as I could tell, it was announced in August of 2018. So I looked at sales prices in 2016 and 2017. I looked at sales prices in 2019 and 2020 to date, and actually found that the sales prices in 2019 and 2020 are about on average, about 14% higher than in that 2016, 2017 period. And I didn't look at 2018, just thinking that was really before the construction started, but tried to look at the two different periods. That suggested to me that the Amazon project has not had a negative effect on home prices in that neighborhood. That 14% increase is a greater increase than inflation during that time. So I would attribute that to a couple of things. One, I think Garner is just growing, and there is demand, and that is a good general location with good access, and I think that drives demand for houses, and it drives property values up. And I also think that people tend to like to live near where they work. That's not the only thing they're looking at, but employment to a certain extent drives residential value. And this proposed subdivision will be a driver of employment, just like the Amazon project is. So it is my conclusion by looking at those other properties and just looking at the general area, that the proposed subdivision will not have a negative effect on the adjacent or abutting property. And it's also my professional opinion that the proposed subdivision will be compatible with the proximate area in which it is located. Be glad to answer any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hester. Council members, any questions for Mr. Hester over here? Here? Down here? Here? You have a question, Mr. Tellinger? All right.
Thank you for your testimony. You noted residential property that abuts this property to the south?
Yes.
Residential?
Yes.
And your sworn testimony is that the development of this I-2 industrial property won't have an adverse impact on the property value of that property?
I do agree with that. That is, I will testify to that development of this property for industrial use will not have a negative effect on those properties. Really specifically looked at the subdivision itself, and also acknowledged that the development, based on the current zoning, development for industrial use is maybe not inevitable, but it's likely to happen at some point in the future. But I do think that with the appropriate setbacks, 45-foot setback and screening, that those properties will not be affected by this proposed use.
The property was not developed and stayed as it is now. Would it appraise and appreciate in value to a greater extent than if it's developed as an industrial use?
Let me make sure I understand. The property adjacent on the south, if the subject property, if this property is developed, that it will appreciate as normal.
If the subject property is not developed,
Yes.
will the neighboring property appreciate to a greater extent than
I
if
don't
it is
think it'll
developed?
appreciate at a greater extent if this property is not developed.
Another question is, you noted looking at the appraisal prices of the homes in Hunter's Mark.
Yes.
And coming up with a 14% sort of increase.
Right.
2019 to 20. How does that compare to the rest of Garner?
I do not know. I can't tell you. I did not.
That would be the logical baseline to determine what the impact of the existing Amazon industrial site is
Right.
on that property, correct? That would be a good measure of.
That would be a sort of a next level of analysis
Right.
to look at that, yes.
And so, but you don't have any evidence that Amazon has depressed the home prices there relative to other places that aren't near Amazon.
You mean, you are suggesting that they appreciated greater than inflation, but you think not as much as somewhere else?
Inflation's not the measure by which you measure the appreciation of real estate. You compare it to other real estate in other places.
Correct.
So that, you don't have anything to measure it against.
I did
to
not
see if
measure it against other subdivisions in Garner. No, I did not.
And would you presume that if the property is developed, let's say it wasn't developed, well, I won't go that. That's all the questions I have.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Vance?
No questions.
Okay. I think that's all the questions. Thank you, Mr. Hester, very much. Okay.
Esther as well, and next would call Richard Adams of Kimley Horn, our traffic engineer, to testify.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Richard Adams with Kimley Horn, 421 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh. And I have just some information to provide on transportation and traffic conditions, and happy to answer any questions. Just to cover some basics, I'm a professional engineer here in North Carolina and have been licensed for 28 years. I'm a senior vice president with Kimley Horn. I've been a traffic engineer practicing in the Triangle area for over 24 years. Significant experience in analyzing traffic impacts on proposed site plans and subdivisions in various municipalities across North Carolina, including here in the town of Garner. I've evaluated the subdivision plan in question and looked at it from a traffic perspective. I've completed a trip generation analysis specific to the project, and in my professional opinion, the subdivision plan is consistent with the transportation plan and other relevant adopted plans and policies and the stated purpose and intent of the UDO. The project, as you know, involves the realignment of Wilmington Road and the connection of Wilmington Road to Calabar Street, which is specifically called out for in the town's Garner Forward Transportation Plan. The new realigned portion of Wilmington Road and Calabar Street, as Mr. Whitaker mentioned, will be constructed as the town of Garner 3-lane major collector street and with a 74-foot right-of-way. Traffic will ingress and egress the project directly to and from Jones Sausage Road, as you can see in the plans, via 3 access points, one of which is a primary full movement access point with a signal, a traffic signal. The signal is already there, one of the ones put up by the Amazon project, along with a second full movement driveway and a third driveway, which would be a right-in, right-out driveway. And all of those are directly onto and off of Jones Sausage Road. Pardon? The graphics, showed on the screen? That would be great if we could. Yes, thank you. Do you have those?
Want the aerial overlay one, or you want the neighborhood meeting presentation? Which one is it under?
I think it's under neighborhood. Sorry. What do we have there? You can skip that one. And so let's show this just for a second. And this is just for a little bit of background. This is just the existing parcel configuration. And this just is to show you, and I think most of you know this, but Calabar Street has always been planned and laid out to tie to Wilmington Street, or excuse me, to Wilmington Road, and that's why you see it stubbed out in the nature that it is. And as I mentioned before, the town's transportation plan specifically calls for the connection that we're constructing as well. So let's just leave that up, and we'll use the other slides if needed for questions. And so I mentioned the 3 access points for the site, which you can see in the site plan. And then the other things I would mention, let me get back to my notes here. We did produce a traffic impact analysis for the project. That was developed by us and signed and sealed by me as an engineer, and was reviewed through both the town of Garner and the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And the access improvements shown for the project are as indicated and consistent with the TIA. These improvements in access point will provide acceptable overall traffic safety conditions and circulation in the area. And it's my professional opinion that the project is compatible with adjacent uses in terms of traffic generation. And actually, I did want to bring up, that reminds me, there is another slide in there that just shows some bar charts. That's probably useful, since there's your transportation plan showing the realignment of Wilmington into Calabar. And then, yeah, let's stop right there for a second. I know it's kind of hard to read, but the green bar, these are trip generation calculations based on the TIA that was done for Amazon and the TIA that we did for the subject project, the JS Commerce Park. And so the top chart is for the AM peak hour trip generation, and the green bar is Amazon, and the blue bar is the subject project, the JS Commerce Park. So you can see a very substantial difference, much, much lower trip generation for the Commerce Park versus Amazon. And then in the PM, it's even more dramatic difference. In the PM, I think in the AM, it's roughly 5 times as much traffic coming in and out of Amazon versus the proposed Commerce Park. And then in the PM, it's 10 times as much. So just to give you an order of magnitude, this is dramatically smaller in terms of trip generation in comparison to the Amazon facility. So I just wanted to mention that, since I was talking about traffic generation. And then lastly, in my professional opinion, the existing transportation network, together with the planned road improvements, will be sufficient to serve the project, and the project will have minimal impact on the roadway network and will not interfere with public safety and transportation services available to existing development. So those are my prepared remarks, and happy to answer questions as needed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adams. Okay, Council, I'll start over here again. Gray, anything?
No, sir.
Okay, Ms. Behringer, Mr. Dellinger, Mr. Vance.
No, sir. No questions.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you, sir.
We also have an affidavit from Mr. Adams, which I will submit to the clerk. I just want to conclude. So we're confident that we presented substantial material and competent documentary and testimonial evidence, which will allow you to make the required 10 findings. We also note that the Planning Commission did vote to recommend approval of this special use subdivision by a 6-to-1 vote. And I do want to add that we are in agreement with staff's proposed conditions, which involve payment of a number of fees, recordations, and subsequent approvals prior to building permit and CO, as well as an annexation petition. And our entire team is available for any questions.
Okay, and before you sit down, I'll see if anybody has questions here. Mr. Elmo, Mr. Dellinger, Miss Behringer.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just one question. I believe you said the Planning Commission approved by 6-to-1 vote. Yes. Do you know what the objection was of a negative vote?
I was not involved at that point in the process. Mr. Sandreuter, can you speak to that?
Yes, Ms. Jones, you can refresh my memory if I'm incorrect, but I don't recall the name of the member on the Planning Commission, but I recall him saying that he didn't care for the Amazon project and voted against that, and he felt the same way about this, and I had the feeling it was more of a principled statement versus a specific project element. But please, Ms. Jones, if you could correct my understanding or memory on that, I'd appreciate it. but that was my recollection.
This individual voted against the Amazon project, is that what you said? And then voted against this one as well?
That's what I recall him saying, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Behringer, I believe it was either Mr. Blasco or Mr. Fox, and if I remember correctly, his testimony in opposition was the deleterious effect on that northern gateway of coming into Garner and it being in this entryway into Garner and the complete site change from having those trees there to just it being cleared out. That's what I recall from that planning commission meeting.
Anything you care to add, Ms. Jones?
Well, Mr. Blasco, I was looking back at my notes to see Mr. Blasco did vote no in that. I didn't write down his reasoning behind it, but I do recall, like Mr. Gregg was saying, that he didn't vote for the Amazon. He wasn't a big fan of the massive industrial, I guess, look, for so as lack of better words.
Okay.
But he did mention, and others on the planning commission, it was zoned for that, for this particular project, it's zoned for industrial, so
Right.
they knew it's.
Okay. Thank you. Over here, questions?
Yes, I
Mr.
got a
Singer.
question, it might be for Mr. Sandroider. You met with the residents, and one of their biggest concerns was the entryway and the fact that their sign, the stone wall, everything, that's not technically on subdivision property, but it was on Doggett family property, who owned this Hunter's Mark property. The Hunter's Mark subdivision, and they owned this too, so they were allowed to put it there. What kind of, resolution, because it's, you're going to move forward with this project, that's your property, not the Hunter's Mark property. So what kind of resolution was made in talking with the residents in regards to that?
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I think you may be referring to the stone monument signages?
Yes.
That are there? Yes, and Mr. James Whitaker can speak to that in more detail, but during that virtual meeting, we have the screen up. And so Mr. Whitaker brought up a plan and noted that those signs are protected on signage easements that are recorded, and so those would stay.
So they'll stay.
Please correct me if I'm mistaken. Okay.
They'll stay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. One more question. I asked at the last meeting, and our engineer, Chris Johnson, stated that this would be addressed with DOT as you move forward with the process, but that is the entranceway into Caliber Street. I know with some of these businesses, there would be attract some truck traffic, and I was wondering if is there any plans, we don't know yet, do you meet with DOT, because I understand that Wilmington Road is a DOT maintained road also, as is Jones Sausage, is how the entryway there, as you turn in Calabar, you have the landscape median and so forth, if that's going to all change, if that's going to be, I'm assuming you're going to have to talk over that with DOT to see if that entryway has to change. Because I look at a tractor trailer trying to make that turn and you're not going to make it, you're going to run over something. That's what I'm asking. You don't have any idea of that until you get to I reckon, to a specific site plan for those units.
What I think I may like to do is ask Mr. Whitaker to address that, because we do have specific plans into NCDOT. What I do recall is that that center island entryway right from Jones Sausage going into Calabar remains.
Okay.
But I'd like Mr. Whitaker to please comment on that to ensure that what I'm saying is accurate.
All right. And as you come up, Mr. Whitaker, I'm just concerned about the turning radius as trucks come in there. I know that through the Amazon project, as you exit Calabar, they added a right turn only out of there to the stoplight. So I'm just curious, is there enough room there for the turning radius of those tractor trailers? I'm assuming tractor trailers are going to be entering where there's going to be warehouse space.
Sure, that's a good question. The majority of the traffic, as Mr. Adams mentioned, is going to access the site directly from Jones Sausage.
Right.
But not to say that there wouldn't be an occasional truck on Calabar. Based on the turning radiuses we've run and the right turn lane that'll be added for Calabar, I don't see an issue with truck traffic there, but we're going to get into more of those design details as we do the construction drawings and get through both DOT and Town of Garner reviews on those. It's still a little bit up in the air. Right now Calabar's a Town of Garner road, and whether it'll stay a Town of Garner road or DOT will take over maintenance. But either way, we'll make sure that we have software that can take a truck through whatever turning movements it needs to make, and And we'll make sure that it can make those turns if need be, and as will DOT and the town want to see those same turning
The
movements.
right turn lane, the dedicated right turn lane in the Calabar will help with that.
Yeah, it'll help widen out that turning radii as you come into Calabar. Yeah.
Well, I've seen the results of some of the software, because I've asked these questions on other subdivisions, and I've gone out and seen the truck marks up on the curb, so I don't buy the software all the time, and I know some truck drivers are better than others.
That is true, yeah.
But I've seen, that's why I asked, because it's right there at where the entryway is with the signs, and I know they want to keep that as looking as nice. It's always been very well maintained and manicured, so I just want to make sure that entrance, which y'all will continue to review with DOT, has been addressed, so you have.
Okay, we'll make sure that's a priority during design. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Okay. Anybody else here? Okay, Ms. Jones, or let's see, are there any other witnesses for the applicant? That's, yeah, okay, I understood that you'd finished. Okay. Are there others who wish to testify on this project? We had several at our first meeting, and so we've already heard from those. Was there anyone else who came either from Hunter's Mark or other places to testify? Okay, hearing and seeing none. I'm going to close the public hearing. Council can still enter into discussion, but I'm going to close the public hearing and ask council if you're ready. A motion would be in order on this SUP SB 2002 Commerce Center.
We have some discussion.
We will,
prior
yeah,
to the motion.
take a few minutes to do that, okay? You want to start that, Mr. Dellinger?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my biggest concerns with this this project as it's currently laid out before us is that there are multiple provisions in our UDO and in the statutes that give the council authority to mitigate adverse impacts of these types of developments. And if you look at the I-40 overlay, it's specifically designed to protect beautification along a certain distance on the corridor. If you look at the review conditions, there are provisions about preserving natural beauty. If you look at conditions we can add to this, there are specific mentions of natural and man-made features. And I do have my notes from that, and Mr. Blasco's concerns with the Planning Commission, his opposition to it was the project as a concept he rejected because he saw a better use for a campus or technology park that had a greater preservation of more aesthetic and natural beauty. And his other big concern, which I'm in agreement with, is this is a major, and I think one of our presenters used the word northeast gateway. This is the northeast gateway into the town of Garner. I've over the past several weeks gone in and out of Garner through there, and it is a spectacular view to come into Garner and see those trees as you round that corner. It shows what Garner is. Again, there are many provisions in our UDO and the statutes that allow for us to add certain conditions. I would like to see a preservation of some of those natural trees as a buffer along that corner of Calabar down to Wilmington Street. We have the authority to do it. Our UDO is written in multiple layers for us to make these sort of decisions and conditions for the preservation of natural features. That's why the I-40 overlay is there. Again, I reference the others. I would like council to consider including as a condition a larger natural buffer for that corner of the property of Calabar and Jones Sausage, where that entrance to Hunter's Mark is, so that there's a preservation of the entrance to the town. Other than that, that's my only huge concern.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dellinger. Other council members care to weigh in on the, excuse me, the points made by Mr. Dellinger? Any? Okay. All right. Any other comments or observations by council before we ask for a motion?
One point Mr. Dillinger talks about the I-40 overlay. With respect to the I-40 overlay is rigid as I think he's looking at doing. Where would be Greenfield North, where would be Greenfield South, where would be White Oak, where would be Cabela's? That's just in Garner, that's not going up and down 40, so I could say 40 or 42, but maybe that's not a good example. But
Example.
That example was just, it was.
That's a good
I
example.
won't talk about how it was developed because it was hodgepodge. It wasn't very well planned every time. So yes, that's, I mean, this land has been zoned industrial for years. I remember I was on the council when we approved Hunter's Mark, and they changed the 2 lots from I-2 to service business to be somewhat of a buffer at that time. But the I-2 zoning has been there for a long time, and I understand the technology park, and that's fine and dandy, but I mean, the accident happened out there in 2009. We're 11 years later, and they're not beating down the door to put a technology park out there. One time it was going to be health and life sciences, and that's just not happened. The way the world does business nowadays is different. And, you know, the value of the properties, I think south of there in particular, will increase. So I think somebody's going to try to assemble properties and do some more of this. I think eventually over time. I don't think it's going to happen immediately. But I understand your point and what you're saying. But, you know, I look at gateways, and let's look at downtown Raleigh pre-COVID, and look at several gateways in the downtown Raleigh: South Wilmington Street, Lake Wheeler Road, South Saunders, Garner Road, Pool Road, Rock Quarry Road, New Bern Avenue. No gateways that knock your socks off. Let's just be honest. But downtown Raleigh developed like gangbusters. It's a little different right now because of some issues they've had, but the gateways into downtown Raleigh, I mean, they're looking at doing something after the fact. So that didn't affect their development of both residential and business interest in downtown Raleigh, all those gateways. And feel free to ride them and look at them. Again, none of them are, I'm not saying they're ugly, but they're nothing that's spectacular. It's not going to knock your socks off. The gateway is not going to direct how your town develops. In a small town that hasn't, that's new and fresh, it might have some impact, but this has always been zoned industrial. I mean, it's been an industrial use out there across the street from Good Mark started in the 40s. So, I mean, this is what this property was zoned to be. So I see your point about the additional buffering. I'm more concerned about the buffering that backs up to the residential at the north and at the south than anywhere else. That's the only concern I have with buffering, and I believe we've got a 45 or 50 foot buffer at the south, as the residents were at the last meeting noted. So it's been zoned, that zone for years and years and years, so you knew this was coming one day. That's why it was zoned that way.
Okay, any other council members care to weigh in?
If I may respond to Mr. Singleton, that, you know, my opposition is not to the zoning. The zoning's fine. The overall project is fine. And you talk about these gateways where they're trying to do something after the fact. Well, here's an opportunity to do something while it's happening and create a gateway that actually does make you go, wow. That does actually, when you enter Garner, say, oh, you got Amazon over here and you've got trees over here. That's Garner. If I've imagined multiple times over the past week driving across Jones Sausage Road and that vista just completely, now we've got, then you got trees every 40 feet. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, there's really still an opportunity to knock your socks off and say, this is what Garner's all about. We can grow, we can be industrial, we can do these things, and we can also preserve these vistas that are the reason people love Garner. That's why they love Garner. They don't love Garner because of our industrial parks. They love Garner because of our trees. And once they're gone, they don't come back. They're gone forever. And, you know, again, the zoning's fine. The project overall is fine. I think the impact of coming into Garner. There are a lot of beautiful ways to come into Garner. This is still one of them. and with some very minor concessions on buffering and tree preservation on that corner, we could keep one. And, we won't get another chance. I mean, we can write it into this SUP, or we can wait until there's the site plan comes in, but by that time, they probably cleared it all off for the lumber, because lumber's out the roof right now. And we have the authority to add these types of conditions that won't have a significant material impact on the viability of the site, profitability of the enterprise that's going there. It'll actually, again, preserve that view for Hunter's Mark, too. Those folks, when they try to sell their homes, it won't look like they're sitting right across the street from an industrial park.
Okay.
Those are my thoughts.
All right. Anybody else? Hearing none
But
here.
sometimes developed properties actually look better in the long run, and I use examples of where Mayor lives at Autumn Oaks, which was a field beforehand, and they got landscaped with a berm and buffer, and got trees put in it, and it looks very well maintained and landscaped. It's like the Minglewood condos, people went ballistic as they cut a bunch of loblolly pines down. But in 10 years, that will look like the village looks like, because the village did the exact same thing. There's no tall trees in that subdivision. They were there in landscape, and it's very well maintained. So, it's the trees coming in there. It's an industrial park. It's not a tree park. It's not a tree farm. If it was zoned differently, then I can see that, but it's an industrial park. And that's what it's supposed to be, and that's what it's planned to be for the years, just like Greenfield. Greenfield was trees, and it's the tax base it's created and jobs in Garner over the years, and it took a long, long time for that to happen. So I understand some of what you're saying, and some of these things can come in at the site plan, and you can make them put additional buffering in and plant trees, and then it'll look over time, it will look very nice. It's not just the trees being there. I'm not anti-tree, and come look at my yard, and you can see I'm not anti-tree at all. So I see your point, but it's just industrial zoning. It's been there for decades.
Industrial, but the reason we're here hearing this is because it is in that I-40 overlay, which requires them to apply for a special use permit, which gives us the added look. That's why we're here, to vet this project at a higher level than an industrial park out of Greenfield Parkway. And most of the reason the I-40 overlay is there and these provisions for environmental protection and vistas, that's why we're at this, there's a special use permit, because it has a different impact. And, that's, again, it's not the zoning that's the issue, it's the fact that we're supposed to give a little more scrutiny to these types of applications for these types of purposes. But, so again, the zoning's great, it's fine. We have some added latitude to do some more, to do it better, I guess is my point. And I'll leave it at that.
It's ironic we talk about the I-40, the overlay, because look how many trees are cut down to widen I-40, and they're not planting them back, except in the intersections. I mean, to widen 40, 2 lanes on each side, look how many trees have been taken down, and they're not going to go out there and plant trees back, except on the exit ramps.
Okay, I believe we've probably had sufficient discussion on that matter. Yes.
Just when I've heard both sides, and I understand, but I agree with Mr. Singleton here, and we could debate this all night. And I think with that point, speaking for me, I'd like to go ahead and move on with it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, yes. I think I hear you calling for the question. Ms. Behringer, were you?
No, I'm in agreement with Mr. Matthews. We need to move on. We've discussed it enough.
And, excuse me, Mayor Marshburn, I was just going to mention that the planning director, Jeff Triesenberg, is on Teams, and he may be able to give some clarification about whether that condition might be something that could be discussed more at the site plan, or where it might be more appropriate to apply as a condition, and what area you might want to look at that in.
Yeah, site plan's got to come back before this council.
Right, if you want to hear from him.
Anyway, yeah, I know.
Want to bring Jeff up?
If the council want to hear from Mr. Triesenberg on this matter?
We were communicating while this was going on, and we both agreed that we'll look at that area, that corner that Mr. Dillinger is talking about.
Okay.
But let me pull Jeff up for 1 second.
I mean, if you're speaking for his position, I don't know that we need to hear from him, but there he is.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members.
Good evening, sir.
I do think it can be handled both ways because the project is in the gateway area of the plan. We are giving it some attention within the site plan process that they will be going through. Certainly the discussion that has happened at both Planning Commission and here tonight in Town Council meeting is stuff that we will continue to discuss with the developer going forward. I do think if there's a very specific spot, it's probably better left for the site plan. But if you want to at least, give us some direction, I think that's fine now as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Triesenberg. Anybody have a quick question for Jeff?
I guess.
No, sir, but I think let's let the process carry itself out. And again, I'm ready to move forward with this project, Mr. Mayor, if we move on with it.
Okay.
I have just one
Last
question,
point.
Mr.
Okay.
Triesenberg.
Very quickly.
Quick question.
Thank you.
Can the buffer and existing trees be maintained as those discussions continue? Or once this is approved, are they at liberty with regards to what is approved tonight to do what they see fit in the bounds of the zoning?
We lost your audio, Jeff.
Sorry, I muted myself
Now,
again.
we have you back now. Go ahead.
I'm trying to make sure I understood the question correctly. If they wanted to grade the site, they would need to come in and get a grading plan approved. That is not my understanding of what they intend to do. So I believe that the process will move forward without them doing work ahead of time. If that were to change, we could certainly advise, and I don't know that we would approve a grading only plan for something that's expected to go through a special use permit approval anyhow.
Okay. All right. Council, discussion been going on for a little while. Are you ready to make a motion on this project?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'll try one here. Regarding SUP 5B2002 JS Commerce Center, I move that the council accept the staff statements regarding the plan consisting in section 5 of this report as our own, and find the application meets the 10 permit criteria in section 3.14 Delta, and therefore approve SUP 5B20-02 JS Commerce Center with the 3 standard conditions and 8 specific site conditions to be listed and prepared by the staff.
Second.
Okay. Council motion's been properly made and seconded. I believe we've discussed it enough, but is there any other comment that needs to be made before we vote? Okay. All in favor of approving the motion as made by Councilmember Matthews, please say aye.
Aye.
If there's any opposition, please say no. Okay, the motion carries and is approved. So thank you all for your indulgence. I know we had a delay from before, so it's been a lengthier process than usual, but I appreciate your time and efforts, and we will look forward to this becoming a good project for our town. You've heard some of the concerns as it relates to the site preparation, so we hope you'll be sensitive to the issues that were discussed here. Okay, thank you very much. All right. All right, council, let me see. The next item is a presentation, I believe, by Mr. Roy Lance. Am I right? Yeah, Matt, okay. This has to do with proposed changes to Parks fee in lieu that we mentioned at a previous meeting, and so Mr. Roy Lance has some information to share with the council on that issue. Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Coming back to you to talk more about the parkland fee and lieu changes. We first talked about this several months ago at a work session, and so you saw a draft version of that, and it's gone through some changes since then. And we also need to go through the formal process of approving it. And so this is a two-step process. Tonight is the first of those steps. And what I can do is just walk through the background information, talk about, we now have two different fee options for your consideration, and then we can hear from the public if there's anybody here to comment today, and then you all can give us your feedback on what you'd like to see.
Okay, thanks, sir.
So I'm going to start off by talking about some of the legislation that impacts this fee and the restrictions that are associated with it. Then we'll talk about the current fee and how it compares to others in Wake County. I'll show you the two different options, and then asking you all to tell us which of the two options you prefer. The ability to charge fees, the ability to require new developments, subdivisions and that sort of thing, to contribute land for the recreational needs of the residents of that subdivision and the impact that it would have on the town's recreational amenities, or a fee in lieu of providing the actual land, is something that state statute does allow. So all jurisdictions in the state, have the authority to do that. And one particular part of the statute talks about that if you're going to use a formula to do that, that if it relies on land value in some way, it should be tax value. In addition to the statewide statute, the town of Garner has special authority granted by the General Assembly that's a part of our town charter that gives us a similar authority. It's written a little bit differently and probably a little bit more broadly, but so we really have two different means of authority under which we can charge a fee like this. And we have such a fee. It's been in place for a while, and it's not been updated in a number of years. And during the most recent budget process, several council members, Mr. Dellinger, and perhaps there were a couple of others that chimed in as well, were interested in whether there was anything that we could do to bring that fee up to date, and might be time for a review and a change. And so we've been through that process now, and that's why we are coming back today. Here's a little bit of background information. Here are some other municipalities within Wake County that we often compare ourselves to for all sorts of different things. Garner's fee is currently at the top, and then Fuquay, Morrisville, Wake Forest, Holly Springs, and Apex. So you can see when you compare them, Garner is either the lowest or close to the lowest. So we are, generally speaking, below the average for what others are charging for this, per unit across the county. So if just looking at it from a market type comparison, there definitely seems to be room for us to make a change in our fee. And we've gone through two different methods to calculate what this fee could be. The first, which we're calling option A, is based on the comprehensive plan, which says there should be 10.5 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents and a mile of greenway per 1,000 residents. And if you do the math from there, you could figure out how much is that per person, and then for every housing unit, how many people are in that housing unit. And so you can calculate an acreage, and then you can convert the acreage to a monetary value if you know what the value of that land is. And so that's the process that we went through in option A. That's the way that we showed it to you last time. So that part should be relatively familiar. In option B, which is the new option that we're sharing that hasn't gotten as much discussion with you all so far, is basically looking at all of our neighboring municipalities, some of the same ones that I showed you on the previous slide, and looking at how their fee compares to the average tax value of the houses in that jurisdiction. So if the average home is $350,000 and their fee in lieu for parks is $3,500, then it's 1% of the home value. And that is that is in fact, about what it works out to be on average, if you look at some of the other jurisdictions. So about 1% is how that math works for single-family houses, and around 0.6% for multifamily or, townhouses, apartments, that kind of thing. And I've got in your packets, you have the detailed calculations that support that, and I'd be happy to pull it up and go through it in more detail with you guys here if you'd like as well. But those are the two basic options, and I'll jump ahead and show you the end result in terms of the fees that would generate. If you, like I say, if you want more information on how we arrived at the calculations, let me know. In option A, we would generate, or that fee would generate $1,649 for a single-family detached house, and then $1,115 for a single-family attached, i.e. a townhouse, and $1,156 for multifamily, like an apartment or a condo. And altogether, if you assume that our current rate of development would be, about the same as it has been, that would generate $150,000 to $250,000 more in revenue than we were already collecting previously.
Can I ask you, Mr. Mayor, a question right here on option A, as compared to where we're at now, is where are we standing with option A as you got presented here?
Can you tell me your question again?
Okay.
The current fees.
Yeah, well, the fees, where we're at now versus that option. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is just summarizing what was on the last slide. So you can see the first column, it says current, and then option A and option B. So that shows you where we are now and how much of an increase each of the two options would generate, or would get us to.
Yeah, so the overall amount was on the other slide, that if you compare.
Yeah, I'll flip back to this slide just a second for you guys to look at, but yeah, that's right. So in option B, the fees are higher, $2,200 per unit for single family detached, and then around $1,400 for both of the other single family attached and multifamily, and that would generate about $350,000 to $450,000 in additional revenue. So, yeah, that's and that's the sort of the at a glance comparison of what the rates are now and what they would be under either option. And then finally, I would say this requires two readings. So this is the first of the two. We have a public hearing tonight. We have notified everybody on the town email list of this upcoming change, and it's been posted on our website as well. One other thing to mention, we did share this with the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee on 2 different occasions, and they expressed a preference for option B, and I think the gist of the feedback was that they liked the idea that it generated more revenue because we have a lot of park projects coming up, and that revenue would be handy. And I think they also liked the idea that having it be 1% of the home value was very easy to understand, and they thought that was that made sense to them. I mean, there was more discussion, but I think that was kind of the gist of the comments. So, in any event, after tonight's process in the public hearing, we would then bring it back for the second reading. If, presuming that you all approve it in both instances, then we would share the changes with the development community and have the new rates go into effect on January 1st. And just a reminder that any development that's already in the pipeline would not be impacted by this change. This would only apply to new projects that are coming in after January 1st.
Mr. Roy Lynch, you had a previous slide I should refer to, but at any rate, even if we increased these even to option B, I believe this still keeps us in a pretty competitive range with our other municipalities around Wake County and those that you've looked at. Isn't that true? I didn't do the actual tabulation.
Yes, I would say that's true. I mean, our single-family detached number, so that the top number in each of these categories that you're looking at here would have been in the $2,200 range. So we're higher than some, but still lower than Apex, Holly Springs, Wake Forest. So, I think it It would make us higher than we are now, but sort of in the middle of the pack in terms of these sample jurisdictions that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Roy Lance? Mr. Matthews?
Do we, in my understanding, we either got to pick option A or B? That's the guidance you're looking. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, we obviously have to pick one or the other, and it would be helpful to finalize everything if you would let us know which direction you prefer, and then when we bring it back the second time around, we can,
Can you pull
settle
the
on
slide
that.
back up again? Was prior to one prior to this had option A and B.
That one?
No, the other one.
That
That's
one?
it, yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make a comment that I've talked to many folks in the development community as well as, talking with those folks. And one thing we need to take in consideration, you take say a $400,000 home. I'll just offer that up just because with simple numbers. But as an average, 25% of that $400,000 home is related to infrastructure, all types of fees, so many other items, but 25% of them. So whatever we choose here, it's going to be passed on, obviously, to the end buyer or the future homeowner. And I understand the growth of our parks, and I know we got to be prepared for that. And I'm just speaking for me. You don't want to put sticker shock on something right out the gate. With the potential growth and what we're coming in, we don't want to run development off at the same time. I'm not sure how much it would run off, but option A, I think it's somewhere in the middle, and that's an option I can live with a whole lot easier than jumping up option B right out the gate. In all fairness to our growth and what have you, but if 25% of our homes are
Pull that up.
at 25% on it, like I said, in the option A, I can live with option A quicker than I could to B. I think that's just jumping real quick, and I know other towns have got other numbers, and we've seen them, but.
I disagree with Mr. Matthews. I want option B, and heck, I'd make it even higher than that. A question I have on here, this shows, we're still low. We're still low, too low, but we're doing it by a percentage. The number for the average home value was what, currently through this year or 2019, or what is that value?
That's actually the same, when we do the budget each year and Mike prepares that table that shows the overall impact when you factor in the taxes and the solid waste fees and water fees and all that stuff. We actually pulled that same data. So this is post revaluation data, but it's several, it's numerous months old now, but yeah, that would be, I don't remember which, January or February of this year.
How much does that number change, Mike, in an average year? How much does that go up every year? A couple $1,000, $5,000, $10,000? I remember a few years ago, we were doing cost of services, and this has been 10 years ago or more, and we were 169. And we've come up quite a bit, thank goodness. Yeah.
Don't hold me to this, but I think our average reval total was like 25% over a 4-year period, so 6% or so per year in growth.
Okay. All right. The reason I'm asking is we're doing it based off this year, and I'm looking at 1% of what it might be next year. That's what I'm sitting here thinking. Again, and I know you're doing it based off a formula, off a number that you have, but again, I look at how still it's less. We're so much less, but you're doing it based on a percentage. And if you look at the numbers, Holly Springs is dramatically higher than everybody else. That's not argue that from a percentage standpoint. But I mean, if you look at the current numbers to the new numbers, you're talking, the Plan A is $300 more. I mean, that's nothing to what they're going to add to the cost of a house. In Plan B, it was less than $500 on a single family detached home. So I have no problem with option B, 100%. In fact, I would add a percentage to it. I would add something to it, but that's just gray because it's not sticker shock. they come much lower. These same developers who are building all over the county, they still come here and go, "Phew, God bless y'all, it's inexpensive." And remember, these fees are paid when a building permit's issued to each lot. It's not issued, they don't pay it when the subdivision is approved, so they pay it on a per lot basis, correct?
That's right.
So there's not a whole lot of sticker shock. It's paid one at a time. We changed that several years ago. That was something that was recommended to us to do, and we did.
Okay,
One other-
others care to weigh in? I'll go to Ms. Berringer.
Okay.
Mr. Vance,
I just want-
Mr. Dellinger.
Just to echo Gray's point, I think it still puts us below our competitors. I'm on the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, and they like the simplicity of the formula. It's simple to calculate. I mean, it's not calculated every time. It's a flat fee. But as we do reevaluations and those numbers come in, it's easy. It's easy to see how we compare over time to our neighboring communities as well. And it's a future revenue generator, where growth starts paying for growth a little bit more. So I'm in favor of option B as well.
Okay, any other comments, observations? Did you have something else, Matt?
Well, I just wanted to, since we have this up, I did want to explain one little detail of the calculation. I don't think it'll change the essence of the argument or the decision that you're making, but we did, in order to address a couple of anomalies here, we did pull out Fuquay Varina. When we were doing the average, for example, the one that ends up here at 0.98%, Fuquay's fee is outdated as well, and they keep talking about the need to update it. So that one's a little bit in flux. And Holly Springs is actually in the process of updating their fee as well. So that one is a little bit in flux. And as a result, we pulled those out of the calculation. And so that 0.98% is the average of the remaining ones. And we applied the same principle all the way down. So I showed you all of them, but anything that was considered not a great comparison, we did pull those out when we were doing the average. Just in case you're going back later and pulling out your calculator, wondering why it adds up the way it does.
Okay. So you're looking for direction from council tonight in terms of the option, and then this is in essence the first reading, and this will come back, is it our next meeting?
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, you could direct otherwise, but as the tentative plan is to bring it back at your next meeting.
Right.
And it is a public hearing, so you might want to make sure that you give
Yes.
everybody from the public a chance to speak.
Yes,
if they'd like.
okay. If council is finished with Mr. Roy Lance, I will ask if anybody in the public desires to comment on this. Don't believe I see anyone who is raising their hand or is, yeah, okay. I don't know if I formally opened the public hearing, but in my mind it was open, I guess. So I can close the public hearing and call for a motion at this time.
This statutory language is a little unusual. It's a first meeting, which implies a second meeting with the opportunity for public comment. So in essence, it's a public hearing, but it's not the same type of public hearing you have when you adopt a text amendment or a zoning map amendment. And it doesn't have the same kind of notice provisions. But
Okay.
for simplicity on the agenda, it essentially is a public hearing. And you can hold the public comment period open until the next reading if you wish,
Okay.
in case there were people who weren't aware of it until tonight.
Okay. Since we would resume the public hearing when we bring it back, or,
Technically, you're resuming your meeting.
yeah, right. Okay, all right. Well, I think there's merit certainly in keeping the period open for public comment between now and the time of the next meeting. Council in agreement with that? Okay. But more specifically, I need council to, I guess, do we need that in the form of a motion to approve either option A or option B?
If that's the wish of council, or you have the option of holding it open, but it would probably be better for the public if they know you have a preference for one
Yeah.
or the other.
I would think so. Okay. Well, I've heard some different discussions here. I believe I heard a consensus for one option, but I won't assume that. So is a council member prepared to move one of these options as the preferred one?
Mayor, I move that the council consider option B when reviewing the parking fee, parks fee in lieu of, as we move forward to be effective January 1st, 2021.
Okay. Sorry, who seconded that? Was it Ms. Behringer? Okay. Okay, motion properly made and seconded. Any other discussion beyond what we've already had?
I just think it's important to note that will help. People always say you want growth to help try to pay for things, and this is an example of something that's desperately needed to be updated, and this will help to pay for future park growth all over town.
Okay. And I should have mentioned earlier, I want to thank Mr. Roy Lance for pulling together information from whatever sources you did that, but it's good work. So, okay, council, if you're ready to vote on the motion, Mr. Singleton has moved option B. I'm sorry, Mr. Singleton. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, no. Okay, it's so ordered. So that'll come back at our next meeting, and if we get any, I guess, written or otherwise information from the public, that'll be noted, and that will also be a public hearing when we have our second reading. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy Lance. Council, let me see, we need to hear from Mr. Franks. Do you want to take a recess, or you want to keep moving on for now? I believe we can, do you have an idea how long this will last? That's probably not a fair question to ask.
The presentation itself will not last very long, but I don't, question-wise, I would not imagine it'll take more than 15 or 20 minutes at the most.
Okay, depends on how inquisitive we are, huh?
How interested you are in sales tax, yeah.
Everybody good to go with this one? And then we'll see. Okay. Okay, Mr. Franks, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight, I'm going to give you the first quarter budget update for FY21. So, review history and forecasting methodology, discuss some current financial trends, provide a recommendation, and as always, welcome discussion throughout. So you'll remember that as we were preparing the FY21 budget, COVID was just starting, and there was a high level of uncertainty in terms of how that was going to impact the budget. It was bad timing. We're putting the budget together in March, and the governor is shutting things down in March, so we really had a hard time figuring out exactly what the impact was going to be. And with a lot of our revenues, in particular sales tax, we did not have data. It runs 3 months behind, so we didn't have anything to go off of in terms of what that was going to look like. We had looked at past recessions, but in the data that we have available, there had not been a pandemic, so there was limited availability to forecast based on prior experience. So based on that, we went with a worst-case scenario budget where we really went pretty deep with the cuts and said that we would come back at quarterly reviews to give council an opportunity to get some information in terms of where we are with the budget, but then to also make updates based on, different services that we maybe cut too much, or if COVID was worse or better or whatever was going to potentially happen. So this is the first one of those. So that's the history in terms of why we're here. And I'd also just mention that as part of this update, we have reached out to department heads and asked them if there are any critical needs that they have that we needed to recommend for funding. And at this point, there are none, but did want to note that. So in terms of my forecasting methodology, we review revenues and expenditures on a monthly basis, and the goal there is to identify trends or issues. So you're looking for, consistent growth rate, or something looks a little bit different from how it's looked in the past. You do that on both the expenditure and the revenue side. So on the expenditure side, I work with departments to get a feel of what they have in the long-term pipeline. So for example, if a staff member's out, or if a position is vacant, how long is it going to take to fill that? What potential operational costs are coming up that I might not be aware of? Things like that that'll help me forecast on the expenditure side within departments. And then on the revenue side, I use a revenue book. So basically on a monthly basis, after the month ends, I go in, enter the most recent month, and it updates the sheet that then has a variety of different forecasting methodologies that allow me to get a kind of snapshot of what we think is coming. So I think you've seen this before, but on the expenditure side, you can see this is a example from economic development. So you have the prior year actuals, the current budget, and then on a pay period level. So each pay period you go in and enter the information, and then I stopped in October. It continues to go on, and that's the forecasting piece. That's the part where you're guessing and saying this is what we think is going to happen. And then you look at basically what the total is going to be compared to your budget, and that gives you a feel of where you're going to be. For a department like this, it's pretty simplistic. There's 2 people, but for larger departments, it can be a little bit more in-depth. On the expenditure side, similar methodology. You have all your different accounts over here. You have your budgeted total, and then each month you go in and you enter in how much was charged. And within this, it's this is police, for example, so you get a feel of what specific things are going to be big expenditures. So if you look in contract services for police, they're going to have 4 quarterly payments for to City of Raleigh for the 911 system. So you know that there's going to be those 4 quarterly payments. That then you have to work with them throughout the rest of the year to figure out other things that are potentially changing or that might be coming down the line. So this just gives you a feel, and it's just the first tool. It helps you identify any issues. Then on the revenue side, this is just one sheet out of the overall, or one tab out of the book. So it has just the high-level information, and then a couple different pieces of ways to project year-to-date average, prior year experience, so what happened so far this year plus what happened last year, based on the last 3 months, so what we've had occur so far this year, and then averaging out the last 3 months. And then you have here, this goes down obviously from 2015 all the way to the most recent month. And then I update this monthly, and it gives you a nice little feel of what you think is going to potentially be happening, or what I think, in a couple different ways to project out for the current year and the future years. So all that is just background to get us to this in terms of where we actually are this year. And this is the first piece, it's the revenue side. So you see on the left-hand side, you have your various high-level categories, so property tax, permits and fees, and so on and so forth. Then you have your prior year actuals, your council approved budget, council revised, and this is the current estimate. So this is what I think will actually happen within this budget year based on the data that we have available. A couple high-level things. At this point, I have not included any increase in property taxes. We haven't gotten an updated sheet from Wake County. Generally, that outperforms the budgeted level, but we don't have that information yet. And a lot of that will depend on the collection rate, which we did lower, but it's going to be somewhat dependent based on the uncertain economic conditions. The next one is permits and fees, and we have a decrease, so less revenue coming in of $130,000. That's more out of an abundance of caution. I think this last month was the most inspection or most building inspection permit request within a month, and so a record there. So we continue to see a significant amount of growth, but just based on the fact that we don't know exactly what's going to be happening in the future, I went a little bit lower there. The big one is sales tax, and I'll come back to that so we can talk a bit more in depth. Intergovernmental revenue is nothing significant. Fees for service is primarily parks. Parks have been generating little to no revenue for the last several months, and that's impactful for 2 reasons. Number one, it's just no revenues coming in, but that's also one of the busier periods. You're thinking July, August, September. Those are the time frames where people are going to be out in the summer renting park facilities or utilizing parks. Now we're getting into the downward period within parks, and COVID is somewhat rebounding. So we are not anticipating significant revenue sources there. It could get much better if by next March, April, May, things look better on the COVID front. Those are another high growth period, but at this point it's not looking particularly good. And then interest earnings, we have $300,000, and that's just based on the current rates. So this was one that we actually did lower a fair amount because we were getting, I believe, over $700,000 in the past. And it's just rates have gone down way further than we thought, even in the March timeframe. And I would point out that that was one of the things that was reflected in the presentation Davenport gave you guys, where we had some lower revenues, and it was primarily based on updated forecasts there. So that gets us to sales tax and other taxes. So this is almost entirely sales tax. I want to provide a little bit more detail on this one because this is, at this point, the big question. So for some background, we went significantly lower than what we went 19% lower than the adopted budget last year. So council adopted to council adopted, we decreased the revenue by 19% in sales tax. And that was based again on the extreme uncertain nature of COVID. We looked at the fact that a lot of the industries that we thought would be significantly impacted, for example, food and beverage, make up a large percentage of the sales tax revenue that's generated. We thought that those places might be closed down, so we went pretty significant with the cuts. And it made sense at the time. I still think it made sense. What has happened, though, is the last several months have been highly volatile within sales tax, and it's actually looking much better now, but it's a little bit unpredictable. So in the months that COVID has existed, going month to prior month, or month to a year basically before, so March compared to the prior March was a 7% decrease. April compared to the prior April was a 16.4% decrease. May compared to the prior May was a 6.9% decrease. June compared to the prior June was a 7.3% increase. July compared to the prior July, July being the first month of the fiscal year, was a 13.1% increase. So you could say that there is a trend there, but that is a little bit hard to understand given, at least from my perspective, not much has changed in terms of the COVID environment. I do want to just pull this up. We've tried to do some analysis on why this might be happening. It's not possible to get specific data at this point for just Wake County, so all of this is North Carolina data in terms of what I'm about to show. But a large part of why we think this is happening is highlighted in the yellow. So if you look over here, you can see business group percent of gross collections. So it's basically what percent of total collections each business category generates. So for example, food group generates in FY or 2019 16.2% of total collections, and in 20 it was 15.1%. And this is just July data. I should have clarified that. So in July of 19 it was 16%, July of 20 15%, and then you can go over here and see the food group was a 6.7% decrease. So that is obviously not positive, but not nearly as severe as you may have guessed given the social restrictions that we have. What's more interesting and explains the increase is the fact that categories such as general merchandise, which generates in about 28% of total collections, was up 22.9% from the prior July. So a huge increase in people going out and just buying general merchandise. Same with lumber and building material, which is, again, a large percentage. Same with unclassified goods, which is not descriptive, but still a large category. So while food is continuing to go down, everything else continues to go up. Why that's happening is anybody's question. Is it stimulus dollars? Is it the impact of not having to pay for childcare? Is it anything that you want to potentially come up with could potentially be a rational explanation, but at the end of the day, at this point, we don't know exactly what's happening, but it looks significantly better than what we thought, and we will know much more as we get more data points, more months coming in, and we can do that level of analysis again. But that's where we're at with sales tax. So at this point, I've assumed that we generate approximately the same amount of revenue that we generated the prior year, but it could be significantly more, it could be significantly less. It's just too early to say, but it'll happen. And the final note that I would say there, just to give you some prior context, in the past several years, we've been growing sales tax-wise at about 8% per year, month over month. So it would be unlikely for the 13% to continue, because at that point we'd be growing at a higher rate than we were when things were normal and good. So it's not likely that'll continue, but we don't know exactly where it'll end up. So, are any questions on sales tax?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think, would you attribute that to people buying more stuff online and therefore we're collecting that sales tax revenue. They're not going to Raleigh or somewhere else, and it's being purchased in another jurisdiction. And also having more disposable income, not paying for gas, and so there's more spending, and it's being contained in the town.
Yeah, you can't break down, at least not with the information the state provides, internet sales. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that many people experience multiple Amazon boxes coming to their house every day based on the fact that people are shopping, and that would explain a large part of the general merchandise. And then lumber and things like that. It may just be that the housing market hasn't really slowed down and people are still building stuff. But if you had asked me a couple of weeks ago what the numbers are going to look like, I would have not guessed a 13% increase, given where we're still at and the fact that people had already spent their stimulus dollars likely, and it rationally still does not fully make sense to me, but it's where we're at.
Okay, other questions or comments for Mike?
I think the construction is much bigger than we think. I just recently, in the past few weeks, had quite a bit of work done in my house, and just talking to the folks that's doing this, so just getting the materials is a hard thing. He spends half his time going around looking, just trying to find things. And like a 2x4, he told me, I forgot what number, or sheet of plywood, how much he had gone up in price. So a lot of people are redoing their homes, and just a straight out building industry. He stated that they had given quotes on houses, how much it was going to be to build it. Now they had to go back and revise them because of the costs were significantly up. So that, just in that one industry, that's probably a great deal to do with that happening right there, plus more people staying at home and educating kids at home and those things. But that, just the building itself is probably really unbelievable how much that truly is. So where we lose on one thing, it significantly picks back up on another.
Yeah, that appears to be the case. And I would have guessed that the potential job losses would have offset that, but at this point, it does not appear to. On the other side, current expenditure trends, so I'm not going to go through these in great detail. The vast majority of them are miscellaneous savings that we've identified based on personnel, positions becoming vacant. The big one here that offsets largely the fee for service decrease, lower revenue. We are also seeing significantly lower revenue in parks and, or not lower revenue, we are projecting significantly lower expenditures in Parks and Rec based on the fact that they are not having to hire seasonal staff primarily, and they're not paying for those events and the supplies that go along with it. So we do, not fully offsetting, but do anticipate a significant amount of savings there. So the net result is additional revenue above budgeted of about $760,000 and savings of round up to $580,000. So in much better shape than we thought we were going to potentially be. From a percentage standpoint, I would still point out we're 1.4% under the revised budget at this point in terms of the decrease, and 1.8% from revenues. It's still not a large percentage increase, but dollar-wise, looking in much better shape. All that to be said, at this point, based on the uncertain nature of sales tax, staff's recommendation is that no adjustments be made until we get a few more months, make sure that the trend continues, and we could come back with some additional actual recommendations for potentially spending those dollars at the next quarterly review, when we would have another month or two, and we could really hopefully at that point have an actual trends line versus things kind of being really bad and then getting okay and now looking really good. So that would be staff's recommendation, but we are open to suggestions. And with that, I'll take any other questions.
Okay, Council, any other questions for Mike?
Just a very quick one on the modeling and forecasting going forward. Are you still being conservative and sort of anticipating potentially another pullback? And then are you using previous data to sort of guide what our expectations should continue to be on the revenue side?
Yeah, it still continues to be hard, because if you looked at the sales tax numbers that I talked about, the low end is a 16.4% decrease, which is about what I was thinking would potentially happen. But then even the other months, March and May, were only 7%, which we'd actually still be much better off. So it's still hard, but I am still definitely going worst case with that reality that cases appear to be going up, and there appears to be a second wave. So that's the approach, and that's certainly the approach here, to not make any adjustments until we really have a good understanding of what exactly is happening.
Okay. I believe at this point, we're essentially receiving this as information.
Sir.
All right, I'll confess that the figures look better than I would have anticipated as we were going into this whole COVID issue several months ago. And so it's a pleasant, shall I say, surprise, or it's pleasing to see that we're as well off as we are, better off than I'd anticipated. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else for Mike? Okay, thank you, Mike. We appreciate that. We do have a couple of other items, probably wouldn't take too long, but we can take a brief recess if you'd like to and come back and handle those. I'm not sure exactly how long it'll take. What's the desire of council? I know we usually try to break around 9 o'clock.
Let's do take that recess.
Okay,
Sometimes
all
we
right.
get long-winded afterwards.
All right, let's take about 5 minutes and come on back, and that'll give everybody a chance to stretch their legs and to do whatever else they need, and let's wrap up the agenda after that, all right? Thank you.
That's for us.
Okay, council, thank you for coming back promptly, and we will resume our meeting. I'll declare us formally back in session. I did learn during the break that we need to, if you will, amend the agenda to have a closed session to discuss a couple of different items, and we can give you the site at the time unless you want it now. But I would entertain a motion that we amend and add on a closed session at the end of our regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and properly seconded. Any question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It is so ordered. Okay, so Mr. Roy Lance, you are up as relates to item 2 under new and old business, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think this will probably be a relatively short item to explain. There's no presentation or anything. As you all know, we've been working with McAdams to do the design for both the future Meadowbrook Park and the future Jurgen Park. And several months ago, when we got to a certain stage and we presented the draft plans to you all, and council expressed an interest in being able to dig into those plans a little bit more and spend some more time with them in some special meetings that we had at the GPAC. And as a result, McAdams did 3 additional sessions, one multi-hour session on Meadowbrook and another one for Jurgen, and then a third one where they brought back the revised versions from the first 2 meetings. And so I think as a result, you all feel like we're in a good place and moving along well in the direction that you want. But those were additional meetings that were not in the original scope of the work that McAdams has to do. There is still more work left on that contract, and so if we want McAdams to be able to finish the rest of the original scope items, we need to approve this change order to put a little bit of extra money in the contract to help pay for the extra meetings. We're talking about $11,490. And just to give you a frame of reference, the total cost for the master planning so far on both parks combined is about $125,000 roughly. So it's not a significant change order, but it does reflect the work that went into both the time at the meetings, but also the time preparing for the meetings and making some of the changes to the plans and so on. So we're asking for your approval tonight to increase the amount of that contract by $11,490 to reflect that work.
Okay, and that can be done by approval of this ordinance number here, I believe, right?
That's right, yeah. There's a budget amendment that's associated with this item, and so if you approve that ordinance, that will take care of everything.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Any question? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And there is no opposition, say no? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Roy Lance. We'll approve that. Okay. Item J on our agenda, committee reports. Are there any? Okay, hearing none. Manager reports. Mr. Manager.
Just the Garner info in your packet, handful of items to work there, and then also just a reminder about the Connect conference continues. I believe they're going every Thursday. Is that right? Yeah, every
Yes.
Thursday for the next few weeks. So logged in last week and had a very good session on economic development. So we'll continue to do that for, I guess, several more weeks is the format.
It's just 2 more weeks.
Two more weeks, yes.
And by the way, I may be the only one, but for some reason I didn't get the email that gave me the login information, and Mr. Hodges was helpful in getting that. So if anybody has a problem there, or if you didn't receive your email, let him know, and he can help you get to the link. But the next one will be this Thursday at 10 o'clock, I believe it is.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And that's it. Oh. Yeah.
One other item that's the Economic Development Department has put together the Garner Business and Resiliency Series, and that is a webinar series for local businesses to help navigate some of the challenges that have been created by COVID. That is being produced by the Economic Development Department and in conjunction with the Chamber, who's helping us with registrations for that. And that begins tomorrow with a cybersecurity session. They're on consecutive, 4 consecutive Tuesdays in November. There'll be one on financial matters. There'll be one that our police department will be leading on active shooter training. And then also there's going to be a preparedness class that our fire chief, Matt Poole, that was here tonight, will be hosting. So that's a production of the Economic Development Department in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, John. Okay. So, Ms. Jones, any reports from our attorney?
I'm going to make my report in closed session.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, council reports. I'll start with, to my right, with Mr. Vance.
I do not have anything to report.
Okay, sir. Mr. Dellinger?
Just everyone vote tomorrow. That's it.
Okay.
That should go down in history.
You sure you don't have anything else? No, I'm teasing.
No.
Okay. Ms. Behringer?
Yes, the sign on Garner Road in front of Garner Rec Park indicating that we are an All-America city, the sign on the west side of the sign is covered with mildew. So if we could get that cleaned, the south, east side is not, but it looks really bad. So if we can get that clean. Also, there is I'm not sure exactly what you call it, something to do with keeping the storm drain clear. There is just a big pile of some kind of material sitting at the edge of the driveway into the rec center. It's been there for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's something to do with keeping things from, it's out of place.
Filter material that goes around the grate.
But no, it's not around the grate, it's just sitting in the driveway.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying it typically goes around the
Yes,
grate, but
yes,
it got
yes.
washed
Yeah,
down.
it's
So, yeah,
been sitting there
some of us will be there in the morning, so we'll.
Okay, all right,
take a look at
great. Question about, if I understand correctly or not, that when Amazon opened, that the trucks were to go all the way to the far entrance and go in and then come out at the other end near 40 as they were leaving the property. Is that true or not? Do I remember that correctly?
I believe that's correct, but I'm not
Okay,
certain.
they are coming back out the end nearest Garner Road. I've seen them several times, and they hold up traffic because they pull out into the right-of-way. So if you can look into
We'll check.
that. They're
One of
not-
those truck movements was a temporary movement that was set up for the temporary conditions during construction.
No,
So
it's last week.
No, I'm sorry. The notion of coming out only at the 40 end, I can't remember if that was the permanent configuration or temporary. So we'll check and see what that was
That's pretty
supposed to
much
be.
what they sold it as, is that would help. With the traffic problem is that the trucks would come out on the 40 end, and they're not. They're coming out on the third entrance into the property.
Okay, we're working with them on some other issues, so we'll talk to
Okay,
them
and do
about
we have any updates on those cabs that have been parked in the stub outs?
the same update that I sent out on Friday, that we've got a plan developed between the JS Commerce folks that were here tonight and Amazon their team. They are working on educating the drivers. Part of the challenge is those are contract drivers. They're not Amazon employees, so they don't have a direct line of communications to some of them. And then the Amazon folks have agreed to pay for the installation of some barricades in the driveways. Where most of those cabs are parking are the driveways of that project that you saw tonight. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough depth for them to back in. And so barriers are going to be installed in those driveways, and Amazon is going to help share in the cost of those. And they were hoping that those would get installed the first part of this week. So once we know that those have been installed, we'll update council.
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Singleton.
I agree, that looks bad. I sent you an email, responded to what a citizen had said, and I just can't believe they park over there. But anyway, when I drove by today, they were putting some metal stakes in the road to stub out, and it looked like hardware cloth. I don't know, not chicken wire, it looked like hardware cloth they were putting to wrap around it to be the barrier. Now, I don't know. They should have done something maybe a little more colorful or loud so they'll see it and won't run into it, but that's what I saw them doing today on one of them.
So the agreement was Waterfield, the barricade barriers was the original plan. So
and that may
we'll see if
be. I'm
that's
just saying, I
changed.
just saw them putting stakes down in the asphalt down the stub out near the end and wrapping some, what again look like hardware cloth. Maybe that's some reinforcement. I don't know. We'll see, because I thought that was not a very substantial. It's not easy to see, so I'm glad it's being addressed, because it is. I don't understand how someone thinks they can park their cab on somewhere that's not their property.
Yeah.
Well, we have a challenge with truck parking all over town. So while we hate that it's happening there as well, we're constantly battling that. Our staff is out moving trucks on nearly a daily basis, and most of the truck drivers that we talk to simply don't know in most cases that there's an issue or a regulation against it. So it's not excusable. It's just that we got the challenge all over town.
I understand. This is just interesting because apparently part of where they're parking appears to be on DOT right away. So I know the good and well they don't allow that. But again, enforcing it and getting them to move, it's two different things. Anyway, thank y'all for addressing it, and hopefully after the action they take this week, it'll resolve itself.
Okay, Mr. Matthews. Okay, so, all right, that's all the council reports, and the mayor doesn't have anything specific tonight. I can wait. So, all right, I will give you one of the sites for our closed session is GS 143.318.11A5. That is under the heading of real estate, I believe. Is that right, Mr. Attorney?
That's correct.
And then could you give us the site for the other item?
Yes, it's 143-318.11A3 to consult with an attorney regarding pending litigation.
Okay. So
So
council.
moved.
Okay, thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, seconded. All right, all in favor of going into closed sessions on the basis of these two items, please say aye. Aye. And there is no opposition, so I'm going to declare adjournment from the regular session and go. Okay, we're back in open session, having gone into closed session to discuss two matters. One was a real estate issue where we received some information from staff. No specific formal action was taken at this point in time. The second item had to do with possible litigation, and our attorney updated the council on that. No specific action was taken in that regard. Council, do I have a motion for us to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Did you get that, Mr. Dellinger, I believe, or excuse me, Mr. Vance, who seconded it?
I'll second.
Okay, we go. All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I declare our meeting formally adjourned. Thank you all.